Hello, guys, and welcome into episode 6 of the Emmitt Sevores Show. I am, of course, your host, Emmitt Sevores. Today, joined alongside me is Dylan Brueske for the first time on my channel. Dylan, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm excited. We've never done a show just us two.
We have
We've
not.
never even met in person. So,
We have
uh,
we have not. That's and again, that's I don't think that a lot of people understand how crazy that is because like I met all of you different ways.
yeah,
I know you guys all met through I believe you guys all met through stuff at
Green
Ever
River.
or Green River, sorry.
Yeah.
But it's like I met, Steezy or Calvin. I met him at Highline. I like knew of Noah because of Steezy because he was my editor and
Mhm.
we talked when, on our downtime. And then it's like then I actually met Noah at WSU. Then of course I
Yeah.
met you through them. Just like
It's
super duper
crazy, man.
crazy. So yeah,
It's
first time on the
crazy, man.
channel.
Yeah.
Glad having you on, of course. I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll have the bolt. The schedule is always so like down to the last minute. I'm sure it'll be. If I had to take a wild guess, it'll probably be Sunday in between the two games. If I had to take a wild guess,
Yeah. Either in between or like after
yeah,
the last game and then just do a whole recap of the whole weekend.
yeah.
We'll
I
wait
can
and see.
wild card weekend was fantastic. Lots of really good games. I missed out on a little bit of the analysis. We talked about the Jags. You guys
Mhm.
talked about the Seahawks, but
Mhm.
let's keep it with the Jags. The Jaguars are playing against the Chiefs this week. Amazing 27 points. They were down to the Chargers. Wound up coming all the way back, beating the Chargers, who gagged it again.
They couged
And
it, man. They
they
couged
couged it.
it.
That's for sure. Again, I went to WSU, zero loyalty to WSU. I will use couged it. I will make all the jokes. One of my favorite memories. Now that I'm out of there, I can say this. One of my favorite memories. Me and my buddy, who also currently goes to WSU, huge UW fans, and it's like we were in uh his like his grandma like lives with him in like a separate like their like garage area.
Mhm.
Oh my god, we were out there watching their what was it, like 32-point collapse to UCLA. Oh,
I remember
oh,
that.
it was
Oh,
awesome. It
oh
was just the
man.
best. So not exactly, I got to be honest. I was also watching Apple Cup this year and I was decked out in my Coug stuff because I wanted to, make it back to my apartment and everything, but like my dad was neutral. My mom is a dog, so she was wearing that stuff and it's like, I'm watching the game and I was like, let me try to root for WSU. And it's like, then they started cheering, and I was just like, ugh. Okay, UW. Like, all right. I was
Yeah.
like, fist bumping my mom underneath the table or whatever, or
Yeah.
underneath the where no one could see it or anything. But yeah, let's get into this, Jags. Do you think that they have a chance to stay hot and wind up beating the Chiefs? Who do you have in this one?
Uh, I think they have a chance. Am I going to come on the show for the first time ever and this be my first take that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to take down Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? No. I'm going to be honest. I think it's going to be too much to overcome. Not only the firepower of the Kansas City Chiefs offense that we all know, we're talking about the team that has the most passing yards, the second most yards per attempt, first in passing touchdowns, and gave up the uh, third least amount of sacks this season. Plus, not only that, but we got to talk about the conditions for this game as well. We're talking Kansas City, Missouri tomorrow at game time is going to be a high of 36 and a 70% chance of snow. The Jacksonville Jaguars do not play in the snow. Uh, I doubt very few of them will ever play in the snow, especially a home game. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Uh, you look at like the coldest place that they could play in their division, and that's Indianapolis. Well, guess what? Indianapolis is a dome, so they don't even have to worry about interdivision. I mean, maybe Tennessee, but I don't really think Tennessee gets 36 and snowy very often. But also, you look defensively, the or the Kansas City Chiefs have given up or have the second most sacks in the league this year, only behind the Philadelphia Eagles. And Trevor Lawrence is coming into this game banged up. Brandon Sheriff's coming into this game banged up, who's obviously their best offensive lineman as well. Granted, he's interior, so it's not as important in the pass protection game, but it's still a very important piece to have. I would love to pick Trevor Lawrence. I've always liked Trevor Lawrence. I always liked him at Clemson. Frankly, I've always really kind of secretly rooted for Clemson. I've always kind of liked Clemson, so I've always liked Trevor Lawrence coming up. But I got to go with Kansas City in this one. They just have too much talent. They have too much firepower and playoff experience. It's going to come down to a lot of playoff experience between your quarterback and your coach and some of the best players, the core players of this Kansas City Chiefs team. They've been there, done that. They've made multiple Super Bowls. They've won a Super Bowl. I'm going Kansas City, 2-possession game, 34-21.
Yeah, I think we could see it play out very similar to how their game this year when they played each other played out.
Yeah.
Again, they won by 10. Even then, it wasn't as close as the score made it look. Kansas City was in control the entire time. Again, Kansas City's defense is really what makes this game a lot more interesting for me, with the fact that they're like not bad. Like, even before the season, we, you and me were, getting into it about, the Chiefs and, all of that stuff. And, you were like, the Chiefs defense like sucks. And my defense was like, maybe they won't. Like, there was no logic behind it. It was all hopes and prayers. It was just like, maybe they won't. And again, they're not a top whatever defense. But I think this is one of the first games with Patrick Mahomes that I think you can flat out say that they're pretty much the better team. Close. I don't want to say everywhere, but like close to everywhere, especially you look across the offense. Their offensive line is a lot better than Jacksonville's. Their running back, I think that's probably a wash with Travis Etienne and with how hot Jerick McKinnon has been lately. But then you take a look, even like skill positions, and it says more about the Jags than it does the Chiefs, with the Jags rolling out like Green Bay like wide receivers, or Green Bay before their draft wide receivers, just really, really not good. But they're better everywhere. They're better at quarterback, as much as I love Trevor Lawrence too. Like the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that a lot of people have gotten, because he's now, I think a lot of people are now putting him in like their top 5 of quarterbacks. I have him at 4. Like, I'm guilty of it too. But I think that we're starting to forget like how big that drop off from 1, even from just 1 to 2 is. Like, even from just Mahomes to Allen or Mahomes to Bro, like there is that huge of a drop off. I'm going to take the Chiefs too. I'm going to take them in a 2-possession game. And I thought that you bringing up the weather was very interesting, because I remember the Jags have played a couple of gross games throughout this season when it comes to weather. They played one at the Jets late in the season. That one was like almost a do or die game for both teams. And then the Jags wound up coming out on top, but they weren't particularly impressive. Trevor Lawrence didn't pass for a touchdown. He passed for around 230 yards. Again, nothing, super great. Even their running game, they ran the ball 39 times, only got 3.8 yards a carry. They ran for 150 yards, which is great, but it's not like they have been, super spectacular. And I believe it was Philly earlier in the year, which was the other one, but they got a lead in. But then they blew that lead, and I don't think they scored, the rest of the game or whatever. I think it was like 22-28, I think was the final score, but it was close to over the second Philly started coming back. I think that we've seen Patrick Mahomes. He's never lost in this round. The closest game he's had in this round was, I believe, against the Browns back in 2020. And even then Mahomes left the game, and Chad Henne was the one who threw the game clinching pass on going forward on a 4th down. And I don't necessarily see any reason that the game is going to go any different. Again, maybe the Jags, if they get in this round next year and we're looking at a team with Calvin Ridley, with, maybe they bring in another, wide receiver threat, lower cost, I would assume. And maybe if they come in with like a top 10 defense, a legitimate top 10 defense, then maybe we're looking at this, maybe we're looking at them as a team who could potentially take down the Chiefs. But for right now, I think it's Kansas City. Next game up, the Eagles. A lot of people are thinking that they could be rusty. And this is the most trendy pick I've seen all this week has been, the Giants. They're going to do it this week. They're hot. People are calling Daniel Jones, a I've seen people calling him like, oh, he might be a top 10 quarterback. I'm like, slow your roll. I'm going to take the Eagles in this one. I would take them against the spread. I think it's an 8.5-point spread or 7.5. And I'd take the Eagles there too. I think that we're forgetting truly how good of a team the Eagles are. Like we're forgetting that they're the 1 seed and that they got this bye for a reason. The things that do concern me, of course, is Lane Johnson's injury, Jalen Hurts' injury, and all the Philly fans are gonna, or the New York fans are gonna, try to tell you about, oh well, we were in a 1-score game with their backups, blah blah blah. Well, it's like, no, you kind of like backdoor covered a little bit on that one. You you scored a touchdown with like around 1:30 left and kicked an onside kick, didn't get it, and then the game was over. So you weren't really down, by 1 score. I think that that's gotten a little overblown. I also think that whenever players are coming off of their absolutely best performances, I think there has to be room, like I don't think this is no shot at Daniel Jones, but I don't think it gets much better than that from Daniel Jones. Right?
Well,
Like
and
I don't
I wouldn't even say that's a shot because what he did last week was absolutely phenomenal.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
undeniable what last week he was absolutely phenomenal. So if you can't do better than over 300 yards passing and almost 80 yards rushing,
Yeah.
okay, that still makes you a
Exactly.
pretty good quarterback, but not saying that I believe that Daniel
Yeah.
Jones is a very good quarterback.
Yeah.
But
I just think that he's due for a come down. Like he's this is the same guy who he played whatever. I think he played pretty much every game in the regular season and only threw for 15 touchdowns. Like it's he's due for a 1 touchdown, 1 pick sort of game because he hasn't necessarily had a whole lot of impressive games all year this year. His most impressive was probably, I believe it was, I'm trying to remember if they lost that game versus Lions, but he had a very impressive game. I think it was against the Colts, was one of his most impressive so far. But it's really difficult for me to see a way that the Giants win this game without like them going full 2007 or 2011 and Kayvon Thibodeau's turning into prime Michael Strahan.
yeah, I'm pretty much with you on this one. I do think that I mean this game could be interesting. It's a divisional playoff game. Division games are you never know. And that was kind of the whole thing with like last week when the Seahawks are facing the 49ers. The 49ers are without a doubt the better team in that matchup. But you also are kind of sitting there looking at Seattle and you're like, well, they got nothing to lose. They could throw some random weird things out and pull out a win. Obviously, that did not happen. But there are those scenarios where things like that can happen. Buffalo only beat a third string Miami Dolphin quarterback by 3. Cincinnati did not look impressive at all versus a backup quarterback led Baltimore Ravens. So you never know with divisional matchups, but at the same time, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, Philadelphia's we a lot of people have always talked about Philadelphia's offense, Jalen Hurts, and rightfully so. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, both had absolutely phenomenal seasons. But what a lot of people don't know is this defense is legit. They led the league in sacks by 15. They had 70 sacks, and the next closest team was Kansas City with 55. And we're talking about a Giants offensive line that gave up the 5th most sacks. Plus, you have 2 incredibly good corners in Philadelphia and Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And really, just the whole defense around them. Least amount of pass yards, first in yards per attempt, tied for 4th most interceptions in the league. And this is a team that is the number 1 seed in the NFC. So they led a lot of these games. So teams are becoming one-dimensional and passing on this team over and over and over again, and they're still not getting results from it. That's how good this defense is. And I think this is Philly's game to lose, obviously. The only way I could see the Giants standing a good chance at winning this game is if they get an early lead and keep it, and Daniel Jones can stay two-dimensional, and Saquon Barkley can have a good game. That is the only way. If the instant that the game is in Daniel Jones' hands to pass it, I can almost guarantee you he will mess up, especially after the game he had last week. Because let's be real, we're talking about a difference between the Minnesota Vikings defense and the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And that's a big, big shift. Aside from Daniil Hunter, Minnesota Vikings don't really have that bright of a defense. This Philadelphia defense is good on all three levels. I do see Philadelphia winning this game. I also have this being actually, it's still a one possession game, but barely 31-23 Philadelphia.
Yeah. The only, again, another way that I could potentially see it going their way is like if, as you said, if they get up early, if the Giants get up early, because we saw last year, right? Nick Sirianni, and whether, again, they're not the same Eagles team, but it is still Jalen Hurts, and it's still the same head coach and quarterback combination. We saw him get down big to Tampa, again, a different Tampa team. Yeah. But they got down early and never even got close to coming back. Never got close. It's like, I remember I was rooting for him because I was rooting against Brady. And it's like, they had a chance to potentially go down and score a touchdown, make it 17-7 before half. And then like, maybe you have a shot. And then like Jalen Reagor, who doesn't play for them anymore, fumbles a punt. It's like, you got, those are small, like coaching mistakes. And I feel like at this point, I still feel more confident probably in Brian Daboll than I do in Nick Sirianni, just because, again, I don't think that they've been in a whole lot of, truly close games throughout the year, right? Like, obviously, the Lions game, I think, got close at the end score-wise, but, a lot of them, Vikings, Commanders, blowouts. Dallas, they were facing a third-string quarterback, blew out the Steelers, close-ish against the Texans, but they pulled away late. Packers was never really in doubt. Titans, Giants earlier this year. Like, I think that they're not a team who gets down early a whole lot, but I think if they are in a tight game, I think they could potentially be had. I think the problem is that although I did praise Daniel, I gave Daniel Jones his praise earlier this week, I don't think he's doing it again. Like, I think if the game gets tight again, and especially with Philly's defensive roster, like you said, they lead the league in sacks. I can't name, I don't think, outside of, maybe the 49ers, a better defensive roster. And well, honestly, all around roster, but defensive especially, than the Philadelphia Eagles. You list, every single level of their defense has someone, right? Obviously, their cornerbacks, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, that's a, top two, not two cornerback duo. CJ Gardner-Johnson, obviously, I believe they're Reed Blankenship. But then like their linebackers are fantastic too. And then their pass rush and just how deep they are on that. Like, I've completely forgot that they traded for Robert Quinn. I forgot. And he's not even listed as he's not even listed as their starter on their depth chart on ESPN, but you still have Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Josh Sweat. Then you go to the backups and you have Jordan Davis, Linval Joseph, and Robert Quinn and Ndamukong Suh. Like, this is a incredibly deep team. And I think that they are going to be able to shake off that rust. They'll be hosting the AFC or the NFC Championship. We'll get into that last. We'll get into the I think my favorite matchup of the entire week last. But we'll start Bengals Bills, because earlier this week I didn't understand why the Bengals were getting close to no flack for their win over Tyler Huntley while the Bills were getting a lot of flack for their win over Skylar Thompson. Again, neither of them great. But I tried to, break down a little bit. It's like you look at their performances and which one's more sustainable. And it's like the Bills outgained their opponent by almost 200 yards, whereas Cincinnati got outgained in that game. Buffalo had more first downs than their opponent. Cincinnati didn't. They had more yards per play. Cincinnati didn't. Less penalties. Cincinnati had a lot more. And then the Bills won time of possession, whereas Cincinnati lost it. I just think that there's a lot of things that the Bills did that are sustainable, or sustainable in terms of winning. Whereas the Bengals, especially recently, I think I saw a stat earlier today, in their 5 playoff games with Joe Burrow, I think their defense has forced 11 turnovers in 5 games. That's just incredible luck. And you even take a look, and it's like last week, like, I don't think they win that game if they don't return that for a touchdown, or if they don't force that fumble and return it for a touchdown. Like, even if they get stuffed on 3rd down or whatever, or even if it's a fumble and it doesn't go all the way back for a touchdown, let's just say they get it at the 20. I'm not 100% sure they win that game. They were looked shaky all day long. But who do you have in this one?
This is really a tough one. Both of these Sunday games, I'll be perfectly honest with you, are very, very tough to call.
Yeah.
This is a matchup that we could see for arguably the next decade. To be honest, Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen in the playoffs. I mean, we're talking about 2 top 5 quarterbacks in this league. And honestly, I think that both of these teams are going to come out extremely fast. I think they're going to come out bold as well, because I don't think either of these teams want a repeat of last week. And to go off your point about why Cincinnati was receiving not as much flack as the Buffalo Bills, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the Bolt last week. With Buffalo, they've kind of done this in years past, where they just kind of shut down in the playoffs, for lack of a better term, where Cincinnati is coming off of going to the Super Bowl. So I think that's why. Granted, I do think that Cincinnati deserves to have some flack. You barely beat a team with Tyler Huntley as their quarterback. And the only reason you did was because you forced a fumble and returned it 99 yards. And so they do deserve the flack for that. Granted, Baltimore's defense is top notch, but so's the Buffalo Bills. While Cincinnati, they do have a good defense, but I feel like their defense is more, going off your point of the 11 turnovers in they're opportunistic defense. They're very much, if you give them an opening, they'll take it. But you look at Josh Allen, he kind of gives you some openings to get the ball back on the offensive side of the ball. So that's my biggest worry for Buffalo. Plus, Buffalo without Von Miller is a completely different defense. They get very little pressure on the quarterback. Hopefully they can get more in this game for their sake, with Cincinnati's banged up offensive line that already wasn't the greatest offensive line in the world anyways. And the Bengals do not get to the quarterback as very good either. I believe they were like bottom 5 in sacks this year. So I think that this is going to be a pretty high scoring game. But what this game is really going to come down to is Josh Allen trying to limit his mistakes. If Josh Allen has a game like he did last week against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals offense, they stand no chance against the Cincinnati Bengals, because I think both of these teams are going to come out hot, like I said in the beginning. And I do think that this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think both defenses are going to struggle a bit. I'm actually going Cincinnati in this game. I'm going Cincinnati 35-30.
And again, it's contrary to what I've said about Buffalo all season long, but I'm taking Buffalo. I think that although they haven't been super great, especially since losing Von Miller, they've been good, but they have not been the elite tier defense that they were, or not necessarily elite tier, but they haven't been like the best defense in the league like they were last year. And even then last year, we saw them sort of, have a 13-second meltdown that wound up costing them their season. But I think that on Cincinnati, as important as injuries are, Cincinnati's offensive line is really banged up, really, really banged up. And I think that going into a playoff game and both starting tackles are hurt, I don't think it's going to turn out super well for him. And again, Buffalo has just as many injuries. Again, no Von Miller. Obviously, their safety room with Damar Hamlin now, not being active for the rest of the season is shaky. Like Micah Hyde, I think he's been back to practicing, but I don't think that means he's playing. And obviously, again, now they're on their third string safety. I think they a couple days ago had to cut Xavier Rhodes, who started for the Cowboys in a playoff game. They had to cut Xavier Rhodes to make room for someone to come on board to help out their defense. It's going to be really tough. A really good game. Like, I don't think if coming out of, whatever day it is, coming out of Sunday, if I'm, you tell me either team wins, I'm like, yeah, I could see it. Yeah. But I think that I especially have a huge level of distrust with Zach Taylor. For whatever reason, I just don't think he's a great coach in sometimes in those tight situations. Like, I don't want to say he gets away with it because he has Joe Burrow, but like, kinda. Like, no one calls Mike McCarthy a great master of the offense, or, if it's late, we trust him. No, it was Aaron Rodgers. A quarterback can make an offensive head coach like this. And I truly think that that's probably what Joe Burrow is doing as well. Because, I always keep going back to this moment. Earlier this year, they were playing, I think it was Dallas. And it's like, I think they came out in empty. And I think Micah Parsons ran unblocked and lit Joe Burrow up. And he has to look over at the sideline and say, no more empty. It's like, as a head coach, you should know that you can't be leaving someone like that unblocked. Again, they don't have Von Miller, but Ed Oliver is going to wreak havoc in this game. Ed Oliver was doing it last game. Ed Oliver has done it pretty much every game you watch. Ed Oliver is flashing. And especially with, Kansas City's center still being banged up. He played last week. That doesn't mean didn't aggravate it a little bit last week. Doesn't mean he's going to be 100% healthy this week. I think that offensive line really scares me. And I think at some point, again, I don't want to call it a coming back down to earth, because I think that Cincinnati this entire season, outside of, the first couple weeks when they were figuring out their offensive line stuff, they've been one of the best teams in football, one of the three best teams in football. And I think, because I wasn't a huge believer in Philadelphia for a long time, the best teams in the league for me went Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati. Arrange the order how you like. It was those. So but I think coaching in these really tight games is going to matter. We saw it last year with San Francisco versus Dallas. Like, they were both two good teams. And then one coach made a massive mistake, calling a quarterback draw with 13 seconds left and no timeouts. Like, I think we could be in a situation where, someone comes screaming off the edge and there's no one there to block him because Zach Taylor called a formation where there's no chip, there's no help from a running back on there. We saw, even last year in the Super Bowl, who was in on the most important down of the season? Samaje Perine, not Joe Mixon. Samaje Perine. So I think that Zach Taylor ultimately, and again, not that Sean McDermott hasn't had his lapses as well, but I think that it's going to be very tough for the Bills, especially at that home environment. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I was reading Damar Hamlin might be there. That's a huge asterisk on that. But if he is, like, I don't think they're not going to have what they did against the Patriots, where they run the opening kickoff back for a touchdown. But that crowd's going to be energized, and I don't think Joe Burrow played in the SEC, but I don't think he's had to deal with anything like what he's going to have to deal with this amount of pressure, with as low as the supporting cast offensive line wise as he has. I think it's just going to be really tough for him.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you with the fact that if I were to not watch this game and someone just told me, hey, Cincinnati won, hey, Buffalo won, I'd be like, yeah, I could. This is a toss-up. These are two of the best teams in the league, and I think both teams are going to be anxious to go back at each other after the whole Damar Hamlin incident. Just 3 weeks ago now. So I think both teams are very anxious for this game. And I agree with you on the Zach Taylor point as well, and that does worry me a bit. But it's really the fact that, I mean, Zach Taylor's already overcome it enough to beat Andy Reid in a conference championship to make it to the Super Bowl. And I think John McDermott is a good coach, but he ain't Andy Reid. And if Zach Taylor's beaten Andy Reid, aka Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and Joe Mixon are beating Andy Reid, uh, because I mean, really, if you look, I think Zach Taylor's maybe slightly better than Cliff Kingsbury was.
Yeah.
He just has a better team. The Cincinnati Bengals are just flat out a better team than the Arizona Cardinals have had with under the Cliff Kingsbury tenure, or when it was the Cliff Kingsbury tenure, as he is no longer rightfully so the coach. But yeah, I mean, Cincinnati, I think it's going to be a while, but I think they're going to finally figure it out in a few years that Zach Taylor's not the option if you want to win a Super Bowl with this team. They're gonna have to get a better coach in there because we've seen what coaches can do. Look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. That is the prime example of what coaching can do. You take Urban Meyer out of there and you put in Doug Peterson, who should have never been fired from his previous job in the first place, because I think Doug Peterson is a magnificent coach. And in 1 year, he turned the Jacksonville Jaguars into the legitimate worst team in the NFL to a playoff team with Christian Kirk as the number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
He made
And it's
Evan Ingram a good tight end.
And it's not again, it's not even like, yeah, they came in with, whatever, the number 1 overall pick, but it's not like it's truly not like they, came in and they just had they didn't have some massive, like Mike McDaniel, they didn't trade for Tyreek Hill and
Yeah.
then trade for Bradley Chubb midseason, sign Teron Armstead. No, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram,
Brandon
like,
Sheriff.
exactly. Like they did all of these like smaller moves. The Brandon Sheriff move was a little bit bigger, but they brought in, all of these like little things. And again, they traded for Calvin Ridley, but he's not helping them this year. So, they just, for whatever reason, I think they lost, like, didn't they lose like the leading tackler in the league too? Or maybe I'm tweaking out, but I feel like they lost, or maybe they re-signed. So I don't know, but it's not like they had some fantastic group of people that they brought in. I don't know who I'm thinking of that they lost.
I mean, if you looked at a team that had the number one pick and their biggest offseason signing was an offensive guard,
or Christian
you wouldn't expect them to go from the number one overall pick to a playoff team in 1 year. That's just not something you see when your biggest signing was legitimately an offensive lineman. And granted, offensive linemen are very important in this game. It's no disrespect. It's no shot at offensive linemen, but that's usually not a game-changing move. That's a hole filler move. Oh, our offensive line sucks. Let's get a guard in here, an experienced guard like Brandon Sheriff, who has been there, done that for many years. That shouldn't be taking you from what, 2-3 wins last year all the way up to an over 500 record. Especially, again, Christian Kirk is the number one wide receiver on this team. Christian Kirk is who was the number 3 on the Arizona Cardinals last year. And I think Christian Kirk is a good wide receiver. He's nowhere near a number 1 wide receiver. And I do think Calvin Ridley will help this team a lot, but we're getting off track a little bit. We're going back to Jacksonville. But
Zach like that's what good coaches do. Whereas Zach Taylor
Exactly.
hasn't really elevated what is like a good roster that, I mean, I guess you could argue doesn't need a whole lot of elevation, but like sometimes you just need someone who has an idea of something. Like I think, we'll talk about the Cowboys in like 2 seconds, but it's like, the Cowboys, granted, again, different situation because it's not a first-time head coach. Like, they'd rather have Sean Payton because Sean Payton has better control of a game than Mike McCarthy does. I think they're probably equally similar, brilliant offense or smart offensive minds, but like one has control over a game, the other doesn't. It cost Cincinnati last year. It cost Dallas last year in a game against the 49ers. Now they get to rematch that. The Cowboys are very slight underdogs. I had this as my NFC Championship, but I picked the Vikings, and never again. That's what I get. That's honestly, it's what I get.
Man.
I defended the Vikings for the first time all season long, and that's how they were. It's okay. I'm not mad or anything. Well, I'm not mad. I mean, hopefully my team will, they'll get back for me. Hopefully, I'm hoping that we get some sort of revenge or something. But yeah, they did a lot of talking over when the Packers got eliminated just to play one more game and lose to the Giants by more than the Packers did when they played them. Just saying. Not a huge banner, but a little banner for 2022. But yeah, this week, the Cowboys Niners. This is my favorite game. I cannot wait to watch this. Two teams coming off of very impressive performances. Really, the only two blowouts this entire weekend. We had a bunch of close games, but the only two blowouts were the 49ers taking care of the Seahawks in the second half, and Dallas really, after the first couple of drives, exchanging 3 and outs, never looked back. Maybe it looked like it was going to get dicey there for a second. Brett Maher couldn't make a kick, but the Cowboys were pretty much in control throughout the entire game. It is taking everything in me to not pick Dallas. I really want to pick Dallas. I really want to, but I don't think I can. I can't, because all of the things I've said pretty much throughout this podcast with, if someone has a really good game and Dak Prescott had the best game of his career, there has to be some sort of come back down to earth. And listen, Brock Purdy, statistically, he had 4 touchdowns, and he played probably statistically the best game of his career. But I mean, as a Seahawks fan and as someone who watched the game, like, he threw a lot of interceptable balls.
Yeah.
A lot of interceptable balls, or, slight over, he wasn't exactly putting it right on guys. The stat that's been flying around this week is, I think, when the receiver didn't have 5 or more yards of separation, he was 9 for 20 passing. When they didn't have 5 yards of separation, like, that's you don't get 5 yards of separation in the NFL consistently. Well, I mean, the Niners do, but like, you don't get that consistently. And the reason that, like, again, I'm so close to taking Dallas. I'm not gonna do it, but I'm so close because their defense is like, some of the balls that the Seahawks didn't get, the Cowboys are gonna get. Tariq Woolen this season has been a ball hawk, but like, he's not on the same level when it comes to ball hawking as Trayvon Diggs is.
Yeah.
Like, Trayvon Diggs he's quite literally, and like Tariq Woolen is too, a wide receiver playing corner.
100%.
Like, he can be as optimistic as anyone. And I think that they do have a fairly good shot, although Dallas's run defense, which is really what this all comes down to, is pretty poor. I think that they have I think if they're the only team in the NFC I truly think can beat San Francisco, like, not head to head, but like at San Francisco. I don't think Philly can. I think Philly might be able to get them if they're, no crowd gets more like raucous and is hard to play in front of than Philly. So maybe that's what forces Brock Purdy to melt. Cause like, at some point, like, it's almost like
he's going to come down to earth.
It's very, it's like the opposite of baseball. Like, if, in that one, if you're having a slump, if you're not hot, you're due.
Yeah.
If you haven't gone cold, you're due. He is due for one of these games, but I think that San Francisco's put together. I talked about Philly's roster. San Francisco's put together. Someone said it earlier this week, or maybe even earlier today. If they had like an elite quarterback, like a top 10 quarterback, this team's in the discussion for best roster of all time.
Yes.
100% across everything. Christian McCaffrey as their starter. crap, their backup is Elijah Mitchell, who was their starter last year. You just go down throughout their wide receivers, Debo, Brandon Ayuk, who I think is making his case to be a top 10 wide receiver. He could obviously cause problems in this game. Juwan Jennings has been fantastic. We already know about George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk. But it's like even across their offensive line, Trent Williams is still like the best left tackle in football. The rest of the guys have held up solid. And then like on defense, they have like all pros at every level. Like Talana Hufanga, all pro this year. I think Charvarius Ward got some sort of shine last year after, I think he got a good sized contract after coming off of a good year at Kansas City. Fred Warner's the best middle linebacker in football. Nick Bosa might as well be the defensive player of the year. And I didn't even mention Dre Greenlaw, who I think came in second or third in terms of linebacker voting for the Pro Bowl on the same team as Fred Warner. Like they're just stacked throughout. It's really hard for me to see how Dallas, and especially with San Francisco's, again, their running game and Dallas's run defense is pretty poor. Yeah, I saw what they were able to do, if you want to call it that, against Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay was down so much and they don't have much of a running game anyway. If they really start leaning, and especially if they start running the ball at Micah Parsons and they start running, if they start making him have to defend the run, which he doesn't do a whole lot or doesn't do well a whole lot, like it could be over for Dallas very quickly. I think that they're last season, Dallas, I think they had like one of the, it was like the number 1 or number 2 scoring offense. And then they faced San Francisco and they didn't look super good. Like it got shut down. And now this year, they're without Amari Cooper. They have, T.Y. Hilton and Noah Brown, but they've lost a lot of pieces. Their offensive line is aging. They played well last week, but they're going to have
They didn't face Nick Bosa.
They didn't face Nick Bosa, and their running game still, like they were up by a lot, and their running game still didn't look super dominant, and it hasn't for a little bit. It's just, it's really hard for me, or not hard for me to find a way that Dallas wins, but it's really hard for me to believe that this game is ever going to be in like where Brock Purdy is going to have to do something magical. Like as a Packer, I watched an NFC Championship game where Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball 8 times and they won by 17 points. Like it is very possible that this is a game where Brock Purdy doesn't have to do, he just has to do what he does against Seattle. Well, in the second half against Seattle. The first half probably has you losing at halftime as well. But as much as I would really like to pick Dallas, and I think that if I got a Dallas Philly NFC Championship, I think is something I really want to see. That'd be so cool.
Come on.
Okay. No, you're probably not on like the side of Cowboys and Eagles Twitter. Oh my God, it would be just glorious to see that. I'm taking the 49ers. I'm taking them really close. Like I would stay away from betting this game because I have absolutely no clue to take. But I'm gonna say that they win it by 4. I'm gonna say San Francisco by 4.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if there was any team I think had the best shot in the NFC to take down the 49ers, maybe aside from Philly, and that's a humongous maybe, it's the Dallas Cowboys. I, for the first time in my life, have rooted for the Dallas Cowboys now for 2 weeks in a row. I wanted them to take down Brady. I kind of figured they would take down Brady. And now the 49ers, I'm never rooting for the 49ers. So I'm 100% behind the Dallas Cowboys here. I think that this game there's 3 different ways that this game is going. I see this game turning out. 2 ways has the San Francisco 49ers winning. 1 way has Dallas winning. I could see if it's a close game, either one winning. I could also see the 49ers absolutely destroying the Dallas Cowboys. Because we've seen the 49ers do this. They face Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams in the NFC Championship, and they absolutely annihilate them. We have seen this time after time. You talk about how great their roster is. And I agree with you completely. I think that this is, if you take the quarterback out of the discussion, you put any of these rosters minus quarterback, the San Francisco 49ers have by far the best roster in the NFL. It's not even close if you take the quarterback out of the discussion. Uh, and while I say that, I truthfully do believe that Dallas could win this game and they have a decent shot at winning this game. This is going to be the best pass defense that Brock Purdy has ever faced. If they make Brock Purdy start having to pass the ball, which is tough to do because, like you said, very good run offense on the side of the 49ers and a pretty poor defense, rush defense on the side of the Dallas Cowboys. So if Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence can make Brock Purdy uncomfortable and make mistakes, they do have a shot. The Cowboys offense going full force when they're on their game can 100% keep up with the 49ers offense. Without a doubt. I mean, this Dallas Cowboys our offense is a top tier offense in the NFL. And I mean, I feel like the Dallas Cowboys get a lot of slack because they are the Dallas Cowboys, and yeah, their fans are pretty annoying. But also, like, when we're talking about top 10 quarterbacks, you never hear Dak's name. And would I put Dak as a top 10 quarterback in this league? I think he's borderline. I wouldn't argue against it or for it, really. But he's a very good quarterback. But at the end of the day, I think that this is going to come down to coaching. I think it's going to be a close game. Kyle Shanahan, regardless of his blunders and as the offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl, and then as a head coach in the Super Bowl, well, this isn't the Super Bowl. And Mike McCarthy has messed up in playoff games a whole lot more than Kyle Shanahan has. And Kyle Shanahan is just an offensive mastermind with Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk as his skill position players. And that's not even mentioning the likes of Kyle Juszczyk and Elijah Mitchell, like you said earlier. I think the 49ers are going to pull this one off, but I do have it as a close game as well. I have it one more point than you at a 5-point game. 49ers 33-28.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, you talk about the coaching. I think one of the craziest things, like we get Kyle Shanahan, known for 28-3 as the offensive coordinator, versus Mike McCarthy, who, I mean, again, last year had his collapse. He had the 2014 NFC Championship game collapse. And then his defensive coordinator is Dan Quinn, who was the head coach of the Cardinals in that, or not the Cardinals, the Falcons in that,
Yeah.
The 28-3 collapse. There's a whole lot to it. And one of the things that I think Dallas can't do is what they did last week and start slow. Like the 2 3-and-outs, granted, Seattle got back into the game, but a lot of times this year, San Francisco has just put their opponent down. They had 10 wins this year, including the wildcard game. 10 wins of 15 or more points. That is insane. They're just blowing teams out. And again, a lot of that was, or I think, 2 of those wins came against Seattle, a couple of them versus the Cardinals. And a lot of them versus like lower competition. Obviously, they've had their bad losses too, right? Like Kansas City, they lost by 21, but it's like Dallas is going to have to play a clean game, which again we just saw for the first time in 7 weeks last week. That was the first time they've played a clean game, I believe, since Dak has been back. If they are able to play a clean game, which is kind of a huge if, because I think that their defense can steal them 1 or 2. I think like Brock Purdy, and we've talked about it, at some point he's due, whether that's this week or next week or the week after, at some point he's due. He's not going to have, a magical carpet ride season. Maybe they'll win the Super Bowl, but I don't think that it's going to be a magical carpet ride. He just, looks perfect. Shades of like a Joe Flacco's playoff run in 2012 or Nick Foles. He's not just going to have this insane playoff run. At some point, it's going to come due. So if Dallas doesn't turn the ball over, and a lot of that lies on Dak, and if Dallas is able to run the ball well, which again they haven't done super well in 2 weeks, and a lot of that is due to Ezekiel Elliott weighing down their running sets. Like Tony Pollard had 15 carries for like 73 yards, and Ezekiel Elliott had like 13 carries for somewhere in the 40s or 50s. Like if they are able to lean on their running game, and if they get a lead, I feel like fairly confident with them. Granted, again, they've blown some big leads. They've blown, I think it was 17 to Jacksonville. They blew 14 to a not great Packers team looking at it now. But they have the ability that, like, if they can't do, like, what Geno Smith did, I don't want to say, like, it's obviously not all on him. It didn't, like, I don't want to say he cost them the game, but that fumble was backbreaking. Because it's like, it almost felt like in the second half, because maybe with the 49ers, the stat that was crazy, I can't remember how many weeks it lasted, but it was like after that game that they played against the Chiefs, they went, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 weeks or 6 weeks without allowing a second half point. It's like they were on some sort of incredible stretch like that. So it's like, if they're, a lot of 49er fans that I follow, it's like they saw whatever Geno and the Seahawks put up, whatever it was it 19 in the first half or 17? 17. And they were like, like, that was the bad half. And it's like, even then, it's like they started off hot, like they just made some dumb mistakes. Like so Dallas is going to have to catch them when they're cold, and then like make them crank it up before they're ready to crank it up a little bit. Like they're not going to be able, Dallas is not going to be able to start this game off slow and then all of a sudden try to stop a San Francisco 49ers team. Like, even like last year, it was a very close game. And then all of a sudden, when it was time, when everyone, they had to lock in, it's like, I think Dak threw an interception in the second half. And then it's like, we're just remembering all of those like scoring plays down the stretch. It's like, I think Debo had a long touchdown after Dak's interception. They were, able to try, they were down by, what was it? Yeah. They were down by 16 points in that game. Yeah. So minimizing mistakes, they have to stay in it the entire time. They're not going to be able to do, I don't think they can do what Seattle did, but I don't think that they're going to be able, it would look very similar to what happened with Seattle. If they start off slow, they start off with, 2 or 3 3-and-outs or punts or a turnover. Like, it could it's not going to be how it looked for them against Philly, where they threw pick six first drive, then punted, and then Philly put up, they were down 10-0. And then they just like, all right, like, time to lock in. Like, it's hard to lock in versus the 49ers. And I tweeted this out. And again, the Seahawks had a way better season than the Packers, a way better season. I'd always take making the playoffs versus not making the playoffs.
Yeah.
However, I saw what happened to the Seahawks, and I think I said it in the first quarter. Granted, then it got a really good game. Then it turned into the game that I thought we were going to see. But I was like, I didn't miss this. I didn't need to see the repeat of the 49ers kicking my team's teeth in. I didn't need to. I watched 2019. I watched 2012. I even watched, granted, it was a lot closer game. I watched 2013 and I watched last year, 2021. Like, I didn't need to see it again. And I think that the 49ers are, again, 10 wins this season of 15 or more points.
That's just college numbers.
No,
that's college football numbers.
I think I was reading, it's like I'm trying to remember if it was them. I believe it was them. It's like this year they have like since Brock Purdy has been their quarterback, it's like, I think they're winning. Maybe that's not right, but I think they're winning by something insane. Like, their average margin of victory is like 16 points. And it's like, dude,
oh my gosh.
Because again,
their point differential is plus 173.
Exactly. It's like
that's ridiculous.
Very ridiculous. Again, it's like, just since Purdy took over as starter, 17-point win versus the Rams. They had a huge, I think, a 10-point comeback versus the Chargers. 28-point win versus the Cardinals. 13-point win and a shutout versus the Saints. 16-point win versus the Dolphins. 28-point win versus the Bucks. 8 points versus Seattle. 17 versus the Commanders, a very close one against the Raiders that, it happens. And then another 25-point win against the Cardinals. And then obviously what happened on Wild Card Weekend, I think that was what, 18? An 18-point win. It's like they blow teams out like how college teams do. That's the perfect way to describe it. They're the only team outside of, I think Baltimore can kind of do it sometimes when they're really clicking, but like they can have you down in the first quarter run game wise, and you're just not going to stop it. I watched again. I got demoralized watching Raheem Mostert touch the ball in that 2019 NFC Championship. He had over 200 yards before contact, and and then now they're doing it with not even talking, not even like talking about not crapping on Raheem Mostert, but it's like the second I saw he's not Christian McCaffrey. I was again, what made me tweet out like the thank God I'm not watching my team in this is watching Christian McCaffrey have a 10-yard wide hole and run for 68 yards. I saw that and I'm just like, yeah, thank God this was not here to ruin my Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of where I was going with this Cowboys. They have to start, and you said it too. They have to start quick because the instant they take the ball out of Brock Purdy's hands and put it in Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell's hands, it's over. They will stand zero chance the instant it becomes a Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell game. If they can make the 49ers one-dimensional in the right way and put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands, they stand a chance because Brock Purdy, this will be the best pass defense that Brock Purdy has ever faced. Like, you look at the games that he started, Tampa Bay, pretty good pass defense, decent pass defense. Washington had a pretty good pass defense this year. And then Miami was the next best pass defense. Other than that, we're talking about the Cardinals. They can't sack the quarterback at all.
I think the Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were like the worst in terms of yards allowed pass wise. Like I think it was.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I think they. Let me check here. So yards wise, for whatever reason, the Cowboys defense gives up a lot. But that's because hold up, whoa. That's regular, or that's the postseason. I was like, what? Okay, I was so confused. Yeah, but no, they're a top 8, I believe, pass defense. They're giving up just around 200 yards passing per game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're again, if they get the ball in Brock Purdy's hands, that's going to be the way they have to win. Has to be.
And because at the end of the day, the big problem with the Dallas Cowboys defense is their linebackers are not very good, especially against the run. And then Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are virtually pass rushers, and that's it. They're not good run stoppers. They're pass rushers. And so you get a guy as dynamic as Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, when healthy, is arguably the best running back in the league. The only reason we don't talk about Christian McCaffrey as the best running back in the league anymore is because he's off the field too much with injuries. But now you put arguably the best skill-wise running back on an offensive mastermind as the head coach in Kyle Shanahan, one of the best offensive lines. And then you have guys like Debo, who's incredibly versatile. You have George Kittle, who blocks like an offensive lineman, is like just as good. And then, Christian McCaffrey's tired. Let's throw Elijah Mitchell out there, who's pretty damn good himself. So they're gonna have to put that ball in Brock Purdy's hands, or they stand a no shot. And that's the only reason I'm saying the 3 possibilities. It could be a close game and either one can win, or the 49ers could just absolutely obliterate the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't see a way in which the 49ers get blown out. The only teams that have, again, they've only lost 4 times this season, none of which when Brock Purdy was a starter. The first game of the season was when one of their losses in that, they were playing in like a monsoon versus Chicago. And then, Jimmy G stepped out the back of the end zone versus the Broncos. Then they had a bad 2-week stretch where they, for whatever reason, lost by 2 scores to Atlanta, who was just, they were machines at covering at that point. And then they ran into the Chiefs. My current Super Bowl pick, the Chiefs. But, one of the things that really does scare me for Dallas and their defense is how many different looks San Francisco can give them. I was watching, I can't remember who it was. Someone breaking down one of the plays, and they put George Kittle in motion across the formation and snapped the ball. And it's like, generally what, like, he was explaining, he's like, generally, like, you'd have your tight end sitting out wide, and then you'd have your fullback being the one coming in motion at the snap. Mm-hmm. Instead, they had lined up in the slot Kyle Juszczyk, and then they had George Kittle coming downhill. Just the amount of versatility that offense has. They have a running back who can play wide receiver in Christian McCaffrey. We saw him catch a slant with Debo in the backfield against Seattle last week. He's a very good route runner. He's a Le'Veon Bell is the best comparison you could get for him. He's just a way more explosive runner. They have a wide receiver who can play running back, obviously, in Debo Samuel. He did it a lot last year. He's who sunk Dallas. And in last year's playoffs. They have Kyle Juszczyk, a fullback who can play tight end. And then they have a tight end who is basically an extra offensive lineman out on the field with George Kittle. Oh, and he's also the second best, pass catching threat in the league. Maybe third if you want to give Mark Andrews the go ahead. I think that's fine. But we're at worst case scenario, he's like the third best receiving tight end in football. And that's their offense. Again, they just so many moving pieces. And I didn't even mention Brandon Ayuk, who at this point he's a top 10 route runner to me. I think it was last year. There's a clip from last year. I'll try to find it. Last year in the playoffs, it's like Trayvon Diggs, again, who has been a way better corner this year than he was last year, just got torched by it. Like, left in the dust, and he doesn't get I don't want to say like routed up very much, because he bites on the double moves, but he doesn't often just get like off of the line of scrimmage torched. He was getting torched by Brandon Ayuk, and I think that it definitely, again, it could happen again. He's like their 4th or 5th best weapon, and like a lot of teams, he's a borderline like number 1 wide receiver. I think like for a lot of teams, like he's in that same category on like borderline wide receiver ones with like Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, he's just better than those guys. Like, it's just their offense is going to be so tough to stop. I'm again, as a Seahawk fan, it must be like horrible. Because I generally root against the Seahawks, and like my dad is a Cowboy fan, so like this week it's not going to be as much fun because I always root, with my dad or whatever. But like sometimes watching that, like when I was watching it against the Seahawks, of course, because my rooting interest was in the 49ers. I'm just like, God, this offense is so beautiful. But I know the other side of that. I'm like, how does anyone stop this? I'm like,
it's impossible.
Like, can we change the rules here? Like, if you're running offenses this good, only have 10 players on the field. Like, there has to be some way to nerf it. There has to be something. Change.
One of your offensive players has to switch over to the defense.
Yeah, exactly.
12 versus 10.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like you get like 2 or 3 seconds to block, and then you have to go. Starts out as 11 on 11, then mid play he turns into a defender.
It's
has to go
2-hand touch on run plays.
Exactly. 2-hand touch on run plays. They're just, I don't see how anyone outside of like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow stops him. I don't see it.
Yeah, I truthfully don't see any team in the NFC having a game where the 49ers are playing as good as they can, beating them. There's no team. There's 0 teams in the NFC that can beat them on their best day.
I
It
tr- I tr-
has to take like we were talking about earlier, in Philly, where the Philly crowd just goes crazy and it gets
yeah,
in the 49ers head, or the Cowboys just play them the right way.
like what we saw with like if the only team, and this is again, this I picked Kansas City to win the Super Bowl, and I'm not even going to
Mhm.
include them in this. The only team who I think you can match up a game for a game, or if you're like, hey, they're both going to play like their A games, so they're not
Mhm.
missing wide open receivers, and the only team who I think truly could compete with them would have been a healthy Buffalo. That's the only team who has that sort of firepower to like put teams down. Because for whatever reason, like Kansas City, other than the one time they've played San Francisco this year, like they haven't put down, like they're not necessarily known for putting down bad teams. They kind of play down to their level of competition. But like,
Yeah.
and granted, the Bills have done that too. But the Bills A game, I think, could go right up against the Niners A game. But then I'm like still not 100% sure I would take Josh Allen over Brock Purdy with what we've seen from, with how much or how little the Niners offense relies on a competent quarterback. Like
Yeah. They've had 3 quarterbacks this year.
like exactly. And the crazy thing is of all of it, because again, everyone loves throwing out the stat, or loved up until Brock Purdy, like, hey, without Jimmy Garoppolo, this team was 9-29 before the year. So, but it's like, as long as they don't have a literal bottom of the barrel quarterback, like they had CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins, and these guys who like aren't even in the league anymore, and if they are, they're on practice squads. Like, as long as they're not leading the offense, I don't see how, like, and again, if Trey Lance winds up working out, or if this team gets Brady next year, or like they probably won't get Rodgers or anything, but like I know Rodgers would, if they got an elite top 10 quarterback, like I think it's like if you switched Dak and Brock Purdy, how do you stop this
Oh,
49ers team? You don't.
shoot. I think you give, and I know this is your favorite quarterback you give them Kirk Cousins,
Oh,
and
they're
that
no.
team is without a doubt the best team in the league.
And the craziest part of all of it, truly, is that I think Kirk Cousins would fit perfectly in that system because of how he
Yes.
works with Kyle, because of how he worked with Kyle Shanahan in Washington. And it wasn't the prettiest because he didn't have this, but now
Yeah.
he has like top 5 players at everything. He has a top 5 left tackle, a top 5 running back, a top 5, I'd say, offensive weapon in Debo, probably
Yeah.
top 5 route runner in Brandon Ayuk. Like he has top 5 tight end, top 5 fullback. Granted, not a whole lot, but like with how versatile he is, like he's out running, he's running routes, he's making toe tap catches on the sidelines.
Yeah.
I hate to keep saying, but I don't know how you stop it if they're on their A game. If they're truly on their A game, I don't see how you stop them. Like now they don't even have, granted, we haven't seen it from Brock Purdy yet, but they don't even have like a Jimmy G to like self implode and miss a wide open Emmanuel Sanders. Like
Yeah.
they don't they don't have that. Like Brock Purdy
Yeah.
looked bad in the first half and missed some open guys, but then all of a sudden, second half, he was hitting everything, and wasn't hard to hit him because they were wide open. It's just so impossible to stop.
Oh man, I
It's
hate the
it's
49ers so
I
much,
know,
man.
I get it. No, I
I
hate him
can't
I hate him this week too.
I can't stand them, dude. They're so good. It's ridiculous how good this team, because like with this, like going back to like last year with the Rams, like the Rams were a great team last year. But you were like, this is gonna last for like 1 or 2 years. With the 49ers, you're like, when is this going to end?
Well, and it's
Like
also
there's no end in sight when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers.
like the only reason that they currently the 49ers, like the only reason it wouldn't is because of like what the draft compensation they gave up for Trey Lance. But at that point, I think they're done paying that after this year's draft. Like I think
Yeah.
this is the last year they don't have that first round pick.
Mhm.
It's like they and you compared them to the Rams, and I was going to make that same comparison. The difference, again, how the teams were built.
Yeah.
Like the Rams, what they did was, again, very unsustainable. They're trading away draft picks for star players, blah, blah, blah. You know what? You know what San Francisco did? Drafted George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk and Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Fred Warren, like, and list all of their defensive players outside of Ward. Outside of them, and then it's like on offense, they didn't draft Christian McCaffrey. They traded for him and they gave up a good amount for him. But again, I think they're done paying that after this year's draft. And it's like Trent Williams is the only other like person who's not from San Francisco. They built the roster. I don't want to say like I'm not like a whole like, oh, you got to do it the right way sort of thing, but it's like it's hard to see a team who's hit on as many picks, players, free, trades, all of this stuff. And like, again, they traded 3 first-round picks for a quarterback just 2 off seasons ago. And he's played 4 games as a starter, 4 games as a starter. He's still currently not playing. And we're like, dude, when is this team going to end? How do they go down?
They have Mr. Irrelevant as quarterback right now. And they're without a doubt the best team in the NFC.
Yeah, and it's like not particularly close. Like the only reason I give Dallas a shot in this game is because of how explosive their offense can be. But again, like San Francisco's defense locks it down. Like see again, what was it? The stat was something super crazy. It's like, up until was it the second to last right? I don't think the Seahawks scored I don't think they scored in the first quarter of this week's game, but it's like, they had played 9 quarters against the Seahawks and Seahawks had scored 1 offensive touchdown.
Yeah.
Like their defense just, again, absolutely insane. I don't see.
Yeah. The Seahawks scored 0 in the first quarter. They scored 17 in the second, shut out again in the third quarter, and then a garbage time touchdown in the fourth.
Yeah. That I like if a team who's seeing them for their 9th through 12th quarters can't like consistently figure it out, like I don't know how any team does.
Yeah.
They're going to I really wanted to see this matchup is really the one I wanted to see in the NFC Championship. It's the one I had, and I had Dallas losing there too. So I feel like we're getting this one just around early, all because of those Vikings. Those Vikings. And again, and now I'm not even guaranteed Cowboys Eagles, which I would really
That'd be
want to see.
so awesome, dude. It's Cowboys Eagles in the NFC Championship.
Especially with all of the hate, like a true, like in a time where I think like a lot of NFL rivalries have kind of gone away. You know what I mean? Like the days of Big Ben and AB and Le'Veon Bell versus like, whoever's headlining the Ravens defense, like those days, like, yeah, that's a rival. Like it's still a rivalry and it's still fun to watch, but it's just it's not the same. Like in the days of Philly and Dallas still hate each other. And then then there's like a bunch of like one-sided rivalries. Like the Seahawks Niners was a one-sided Seattle rivalry for a while. And it's like, Packers Bears is the oldest rivalry, but that's just an ass kicking every time the Bears show up. Like, there's in a time where we don't have a whole lot of true rivalries in the NFL. That's one I really want to see. NFC on the line. Like again, the game I think it would truly be the highest rated. I think it would be the highest rated NFC Championship game. I don't want to say of all time, but like in recent memory.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was the highest rated.
Like the only thing that could potentially be more would have been like probably Packers Cowboys, and only off of like the Aaron Rodgers and Dallas Cowboys aspect of it. Like these are just 2 teams that are both good. They both hate each other. Even the aspect of like, we haven't seen these teams play each other as healthy as they're going to get yet. Both games, Dak missed a game and Jalen Hurts missed a game. Like there's just so many things. It's why I'm rooting for it. It's why I think a lot of Seahawks fans, wouldn't say they're rooting for that matchup necessarily, but they're rooting for the Niners to fall. Just an insane weekend. This feels like one of the first times it feels like one of the first times in a while where I'm like, this one's really going to be good. Like even like last year, like again, last year, how my divisional round game went kind of turned me off from football for the rest of the weekend. But it's like even last year's schedule for the I believe I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it's like they, that was just absolutely like insane. I'm trying to remember exactly what the games were.
It was Buffalo, Kansas City. It was Cincinnati
and Tennessee.
Yeah.
We got Los Angeles, or the Rams versus Tampa, and then
Rams versus Tampa, and then 49ers.
San Francisco, Green Bay. Like all games that were, they were literally all of the games. Again, Cincinnati, Tennessee was decided by 3 points. San Francisco, Green Bay, or sorry, Cincinnati, Tennessee, 3-point game. San Francisco, Green Bay, 3-point game. Rams, Tampa Bay, 3-point game, and then Kansas City, Buffalo, I think is truly the best game I've ever watched.
Yes.
The best game I've ever watched.
Yeah.
It was a 6-point game, but that was in overtime after one of the greatest, game tying drives I've ever witnessed. We're in for a fantastic weekend of football.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'll top last week. Like the only truly bad matchup, or not even bad matchup, but the only matchup here that we're like about is Philly, New York. And even then it's like, there is that aspect of like divisional game, third time playing, Philly's rusty. Like it could be one of the best weekends of NFL football ever. Divisional weekend is always the best. Wildcard weekend is like starting to get close because it has the 3 games, or it has the 6 games rather than just the 4. It's getting really tough to say that it's not wildcard, but divisional weekend is tops for now.
Yeah. Before we get off this thing, just before I hopped on with you, I saw a video, and I just want to see your live reaction to this.
Oh God!
Someone was trying to argue that your favorite quarterback in the league, Mr. Kirk Cousins, was better than Trevor Lawrence.
Oof.
As a quarterback.
Just in general?
Just in general.
Oh.
Like comparing quarterback to quarterback. That's Kirk Cousins.
See, and here's the thing. And because F1, that's just so wild.
That's an absurd take.
The only thing he has more of is money. With all the fully guaranteed contracts Minnesota keeps giving him, the franchise tags. But Kirk Cousins has never once for me been a top 10 quarterback. No. Not once. Absolutely. Maybe there's a season, maybe you can find a season where it's sure, okay, yeah, he was top 10 that year, but it's a lot of the reason that Kirk Cousins is who Kirk Cousins is because of games we saw last week. We saw him last week. He played a fine game. It wasn't phenomenal. He played a fine game. And then game on the line, 4th down and 8, he throws it 5 yards short of the sticks. And again, that's fine if you're pressured and you just have to get rid of it. Okay, put it in play. Yeah. You had a clean-ish pocket. You also had KJ Osborne. I've watched it 100 times. Getting open over the middle. Granted, Osborne dropped the last one, but Kirk Cousins misplaced it. But he threw it to a covered tight end 5 yards short of the sticks with your season on the line. He's just he's always been like this. And I wouldn't say he's ever really been he's had a bunch of he's never had a singular great season. Last year was probably his best season statistically when it comes, he had 33 touchdowns, only 7 picks. Was the 3rd best passer rating of his career. He didn't necessarily have a great QBR, but I don't really like using QBR anyway. But it's or maybe 2019, but it's what has he gotten out of it? He has what? I think in his entire career, he has 1 playoff win. And it was the game that we talked about on the Bolt. It was the one that they played against the Saints. And I think, did we decide it was 2019? I think we decided it was 2019.
Yes.
Because 2018 was the no call on the pass interference. Then they get they think they get a pass interference call, then don't. It's he's doing all this for what? Whereas Trevor Lawrence played the single worst half of playoff football, or maybe not full half because he drove down 26 minutes of playoff football I've ever watched, and then went touchdown, 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 touchdown with a 2-point conversion that he did on his own and then drove him down for a game-winning field goal. And honestly, if they need it, like let's say the Chargers made their field goal on the other end, and it made it a touchdown game, Jacksonville scores. Jacksonville was running the ball and got inside the 20-yard line.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and one thing that the instant I saw this video of this person giving this take, I don't even remember who it was. So I can't even say who it was, but switch Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence right now. Switch their teams. Jacksonville's what, 5-12?
Yeah.
At best, 5-12.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Vikings record probably doesn't get much better, but they're not a fraudulent 13-4. They're a legit. You give Trevor Lawrence, Justin Jefferson. Oh my gosh. That's horrifying.
I mean, it's like if you go back, like what his worst supporting cast that he's had was probably in his years in Washington, and in 3 years starting there, he was like a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like his best statistical season, touchdown to interception wise, was 29-11, which isn't anything special. But then it's like, he's gotten to Minnesota and he's put up like good stats. Like the only really bad year he had statistically was 2019. And even then he put up 26-6, just didn't pass for 4,000 yards. But it's like, he's had playmakers his entire career. And a lot of people, I don't want to say forget, but it's like Stephon Diggs didn't leave because he hated Minnesota. He didn't want Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball anymore. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was like the first season of Justin Jefferson. It's that I'm sure you've seen that video. It's like, his rookie year was 2020. And it's like, so there's no fans in the stands. You can hear pretty much everything the players are saying. And it's like Jefferson's wide open in the back of the end zone. And Kirk like throws it away and sails it out of his head or out of his hand after like holding on to it for too long. And he's like, throw the effing ball, Kirk. Like I don't want to say that, especially because like I don't want to like start, pouring gas on a fire that hasn't been started yet. But like it would not shock me if Justin Jefferson's like, get him out of here, or I don't want to be like, he cannot be throwing me the ball. Like I've put up historical numbers with him, but imagine what I could do with like an actual top 10 quarterback, or like a future Hall of Famer, or like a consistent Pro Bowler. Like,
I mean, look at it this way. Case Keenum took Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs to an NFC championship game.
Exactly.
And Kirk Cousins can't. And granted, he can't take Adam Thielen and Justin frickin' Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is, without a doubt, the best. I don't care what anybody says. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the league right now.
Yep.
That dude is.
It's at this point, like if you can throw three names out there and I'll kind of give it to you. Although, again, I still have the lead with Justin Jefferson. I've had that after I saw his week 1 performance, I was just like, it's Justin Jefferson. But it's like, you can say Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson. It's like, Justin Jefferson's in what, year 4? And Devontae Adams is in, year 24. He's in year 8 or 9. Tyreek Hill probably around the same. Like, he's the flat out best wide receiver in football, and you can't. You're over down the stretch because again, I would let this is the only thing I can really give the Packers credit for all year. It's like after he got shut down by Jair Alexander and the double team they were throwing him, it's like he was borderline not a factor in the biggest game against the Giants. I can't remember there was a crazy stat earlier this year where it's like he was averaging like 100 yards a game in all of their wins. And in the games it's like in all of the games that they lost or like almost lost, they had like 4 bad performances all year. It was like Philly, their first time against the Lions, the Cowboys, their second time against the Lions. And I think there might've been like one more in there. It's like he was getting like 36 yards. So it's like, oh, shut him down. Granted, very difficult to do, but it's like, stop him and Kirk Cousins can't do anything. And we see it like, again, even though he put up like good enough stats, it's like Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in football. And in the postseason, he got what? He only got, granted, not only, but like he got 9 targets, 7 catches for 47 yards. Like you're not targeting him down the field, which is one of his best things. Like TJ Hawkinson, and I get that, Kirk Cousins, especially, like tight ends have sort of been his relief blanket. Like he had Jordan Reed in Washington, he had Kyle Rudolph there for a while, but it's like, dude, if TJ, someone said this earlier this week, I think it might have been like Shannon Sharp. He's like, if Justin Jefferson, if you flipped TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson's stat lines, like if Jefferson had 10 catches for 129 yards, I'm pretty certain that the Vikings win that game because they're just different. Like, and sometimes, and with the game on the line, the biggest point I've seen all week, it's like, granted, again, sometimes you just got to get the ball in play. I watched Justin Jefferson make the greatest catch I've ever seen on 4th down and 20, whatever it was versus Buffalo. He made the best one-handed catch, double covered I've ever seen. Like, it's not a great strategy, but like, give the guy a chance.
Yeah.
Give him a chance.
I mean, it literally is like a Devontae Adams or a Tyreek Hill type treatment where, like, we've even heard Patrick Mahomes, it was when Tyreek Hill was still in Kansas City. If he didn't know where to go, he's throwing it in the direction of Tyreek.
Yeah.
Because chances are either it's an incomplete pass or Tyreek's coming down with it.
Yeah.
And I would much rather you sit there and just heave it up for Justin Jefferson than throw a 3-yard pass on 4th and 8 to TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
While he's running out of bounds. There was no way TJ Hawkinson is making that play. And I agree with you. If it's like he's a second away from being sacked, he's got someone coming directly for him, and there's no one in that guy's way to stop him. Okay, yeah, put the ball in play, try to get what you can. But even then, I'm putting the ball in play towards Justin Jefferson. I don't care where he is. I don't care if he's on the bench. I don't care if he's not in on that play. I'm throwing it to Justin Jefferson.
He's just,
that's what you do. When you have the best receiver in football, you throw to him in the most important spots.
Yeah. And like the craziest part for like all of it in terms of or for them, at least for the Vikings, is like the amount of money that they're paying him to not be a top 10 quarterback.
No.
He's made every, I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm like 98% sure. He has had pretty much a fully guaranteed contract since the second he got there. He's been, because I believe
so.
Because he had the first fully guaranteed contract ever, like on this scale. I think it was it was like 3 years for like $84 million or something like that, whatever that works out to, like 28 a year, I think is what the math would do.
Like that.
It's like he had that. Then he signed like an extension. Then he signed another extension. I think like next year he's making total cash wise. I believe this is all fully guaranteed. Let me see. Crap. Where did it go? I think he's making like $40 million.
Oh my!
Like fully guaranteed. So it's like they're handicapping themselves. And I don't want to say that they're like blowing some window because it's not like Justin Jefferson's going to like fall off a cliff or anything. But like, and it's not like they're wasting some young defense or anything like that. But it's like you're paying a lot of money to a dude who I think like 20 other starters in this league could do. Like you give Justin Jefferson to, just listing like AFC teams. You give Justin Jefferson to Buffalo, Miami, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, maybe like Jacksonville, obviously, any of the AFC West teams, like all 4 of them, you get like to any of them. And they're like, I wouldn't say they're all Super Bowl contenders, but like, you're like, oh, they could probably take someone down. And yet going into this week, I was the only moron who took the Vikings. Like everyone else, we saw that they had the Justin Jefferson and the other side had Daniel Jones. And you guys were like, I'm still not sure if Kirk Cousins can do it. And again, and getting it back to like our original conversation, like he hasn't shown like, I don't want to say development, but like he's the same player he is now that he was in Minnesota. Whereas Trevor Lawrence had a really bad rookie year, 12 touchdowns, 17 picks. And this season, he obviously his postseason stats are incredibly skewed because 4 touchdowns, 4 picks.
Yeah.
But it's like regular season, 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. Like, and I would bet serious money that he's probably lower than 10 picks again and above 30 touchdowns. And then bam, he's already at Kirk Cousins level in terms of like stats. But he's very clearly the better player. And
yeah,
man, again, nothing makes me happier. And again, it screwed me this year. It really did with Jared Goff. But like nothing makes me happier and has made me luckier than no one in the NFC North other than Detroit for a very long time with Matthew Stafford, but they're Detroit and they mismanaged the situation, ever having a franchise quarterback. The best franchise quarterback in the... Oh, boy, hopefully you're still there. Uh-oh. No, my Wi-Fi has been bad, but hopefully he's still there. Maybe. What I was saying is the best quarterback in the history of the Chicago Bears is who? Jay Cutler. And it's like he was there while again, they've been incredibly lucky on a lot of this stuff. The Vikings do that again. Here, I'll go over our picks one more time as hopefully either my Wi-Fi calms down, his Wi-Fi calms down, whatever it is. Jags Chiefs, we both took the Kansas City Chiefs in that one. I think we both did it by multiple scores. The Eagles beating the Giants losing to the Eagles. The Giants losing to the Eagles. Eagles, I think I had winning by multiple scores. I think he had them by 8. Bengals, Bills. We both had as a close one. I took the Bills, I believe, by about a field goal. And then he took them by the Bengals by about the same amount. And then Cowboys 49ers, we both went with the 49ers. I have the 49ers in about a 4-point game. He had them in a 5-point game. I'm gonna give Dylan just a little bit longer. It appears his Wi-Fi turned off. Here, one second. But again, all of these games are going to be so damn fantastic. I'm giving Dylan just a little bit of time in case he wants to come back on. I'm waiting for his response. He can plug his stuff. If you, again, all of his links are in the description currently. They should all be their Monday Night Fight Talk, also with him on the Bolt. His Wi-Fi shut down, so I'll do it for him at MN Fight Talk on Twitter. I believe it's at Monday Night Fight Talk on Instagram. Monday Night Fight Talk on YouTube. I have that again, all that stuff in the description, all of my stuff in the description at Emmitt J. Sevores, at the Emmitt Sevores Show on Instagram. I'm not super active on the ES Show on Twitter or TikTok, but of course, if you're watching this here on YouTube, thank you very much. Please hit that subscribe button. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. A special thank you to Dylan. His Wi-Fi is acting up, but I will see you guys next time.